Welcome to MatheNatic. We are busy revising statistics for grade 12, paper 2. And in this video, I want to focus on the cumulative frequency curve, or the ogive. In this example, we already have the ogive plotted. Now remember, the vertical axis represents the cumulative frequency, and the horizontal axis the x values. So let's say, for example, this represents age. And what I want to show you in this video is that you can use the cumulative frequency graph, or the ogive, to recreate the frequency table. So our first point here, that is called the grounding or the base value. That is where our intervals start. So we can see that our intervals would start at 0. So the x value would start at 0. And our first plot is 5 and 34. So the x value went from 0 up until 5. So the upper limit here is 5, and x is in between. Now it'll be smaller than 5 and bigger and equal to 0. Don't be too concerned about the inequalities. What I want you to focus on is that we can recreate that interval, and that is between 0 and 5. Next, we can follow the value of 34. So between 0 and 5, we had 34 individuals, and that is our frequency, but also our cumulative frequency, so our total up until that point. Our next plot here is 10 and 79. So the 10 represents the upper limit of this interval between 5 and 10. So the x values went from 5 up until 10. And the cumulative frequency value is 79. So we need to be careful. The frequency is not 79. The cumulative frequency is 79. So in order to find the frequency, I would say 79 minus 34. And that is equals to 45. Now let's use our third plot here. So that's the interval between 10 and 15. So the x values go from 10 up until 15. The cumulative frequency value is 177. And in order to find the frequency in this interval, we would say 177 minus 79, and that is 98. And you can use the same pattern to do the interval from 15 to 20, from 20 to 25, and then 25 to 30. So now we have completed the information, and I want you to recognize that the value of 20 goes with the 220. That's my cumulative frequency. But the 43 comes from 220 minus 177. And you would notice that I marked this one interval in blue. So from our frequency table, we can see that the interval in blue has the highest frequency. So normally you would call that the mode, but remember, mode is the value that occurs the most. So we have this interval with the most values in them. It doesn't mean a value is repeated 98 times. It means within that interval, we have 98 observations. So we don't call it the mode. We call this interval the modal class. So if the question says, what is the modal class? Then you would say, it is this interval. So your answer would be, x is bigger or equal to 10 or smaller than 15. You can also say it's x between 10 with a square bracket up until a maximum of 15. So other things that you can do with the cumulative frequency curve is you can identify the lower quartile, the upper quartile, and the median. So in this example, we have observed 230 individuals. So if I want to find the median, then I'll take 230 and divide that by 2. So that's the middle value. So on my cumulative frequency side, I'll go to 115. Now, this 115 is the position of quartile 2. It's not the value of quartile 2. In order to estimate quartile 2, I would need to use my ruler, and I draw a horizontal line to the cumulative frequency curve. And then I draw a line straight down to the horizontal axis. Now this value right here, this will be my estimate for the median. And let's say that is around 12. For quartile 1, I will take the 230 observations and I multiply it with 1/4 because it is a quarter of the data. So that is 57.5. Now this 57.5 is the position of quartile 1, our estimated position. So I plot a point there. There is 57.5. Again, I use my ruler, go horizontally to the curve and then vertically straight down. So my estimate for quartile 1 is roughly 7. And for quartile 3, you take the 230 and you multiply it by 3/4. And that is 172.5. So 172.5 represents the position of quartile 3. And again, I use my ruler and I meet the line. And it's okay if it's one of the plots that we have made. So we can say that quartile 3 is estimated to be 15 marks or 15 years or whatever the observation represents. The other thing that I want you to notice is that quartile 1, this value of 7, so between 0 and 7, 25% of the data would be less than the value of quartile 1. That means that 75% of the results are higher than quartile 1. For quartile 2, 50% of the data would be less than that value of 12, and that means that the other 50% would be bigger than 12. For quartile 3, where we had the value of 15, that means that 75% of the data would be less than 15, and 25% of the data would be higher than 15. And lastly, let us say we have a question that says find the 80th percentile. What you do then is you take 230, that's our total number of observations, and you multiply it by 80%. And that is 184. So this value of 184 represents the position of the 80th percentile. And again, you use your ruler, draw a line horizontally and vertically straight down. So that looks like roughly 16. So the 80th percentile is around 16. That's the observed value or the estimated value. So what that means is that 80% of the data would be smaller than 16 and 20% of the data would be higher than 16. So what I'm trying to show you in this video is that you use the cumulative frequency to find the position, and then you do the observation or the estimation on the x-axis. So if I were to ask you how many people achieved higher than 80% of the mark or so forth. So that'll be 230, which is our total number of observations, minus 184. And that answer is 46. So 46 people would have achieved higher than 80% of the data. Thank you for watching. Remember to show your support by hitting the like button and subscribing to MatheNatic.